Okay. So that's what's been going on in IceCube, and I want to show you some recent work by my group, which may be of interest. So one thing that you should note is that this experiment is in Antarctica, and this building that I showed you in the beginning actually contains a bunch of computers. And these computers are doing the first level of processing on our data. Our data actually comes from the cables through these stands here and gets to our computer center. So first level of processing happens in the pole, and then the most interesting data set is shipped through satellite to the northern hemisphere, where we do very complicated analysis on that. Now, when I tell my admin or system coordinator combinators, like, okay, it would be nice if we could have some GPUs here in this station, they immediately get very concerned because power in the South Pole is very expensive. The station is, part of it is fueled by jet fuel and also some solar powers, right? So if you want to bring a couple of, say, A100 cards, that is not going to happen here. So there's a problem that you have to be fast in making decisions because you want to inform our experiments, and you are working in a resource-constrained environment. So let's see if we can tackle those problems. So one thing that we did with my students, Felix, you, and Jeffrey, is we decided to change the way we are doing our convolutions from traditional convolutional neural networks to something known as a sparse convolutional neural network. So if you remember those images I was showing you earlier of those events, most of the detector is actually not touched by the light. Only a small fraction of the array is actually observing light at a given time. And so in a normal convolution, you have your data. Let's say that these lighter blocks are detectors hit by light, and you have your convolutional kernel, and you go at every block and do your convolution, and they give you this sort of post-convolutional array. In this subsparse manifold convolution, you only apply the convolution on the dots that actually have data on those. And that way, you can preserve essentially your number of operations to the number of hits in the detector. And because your number of convolutions is significantly reduced, that allows you to speed up this process. And so what I show you in this figure here are 3 different neutrino experiments. This is under construction, and this one is IceCube. And these histograms trace you the trigger rates at the detector. So this is the number of events that we see at a given per unit seconds. So about a few kilohertz is the rate. So that's the speed that you need to be able to make decisions at the pole. This is a likelihood method, so that means if you do a traditional fit, this is the speed roughly of a CNN, and this is how these sparse manifolds can do. So about 10 times improvement in speed. The other problem that we had is the issue of resource. So with my student Andy Jean, we started thinking about low power reconstructions. So GPUs are great, but they're expensive and they're very power hungry. So the idea is if we could use something known as edge computing to try to make these faster decision makings. And so potential applications of this technology, it could be real-time reconstructions in resource limiters environments, such as the South Pole, but you could also think about like maybe balloon flights or other places where you have much resources. And this you can find in this recent paper here. So how much power is low power? So I have a bunch of computing technologies here. So this is the A100 GPUs. This is a gaming computer. There's a MacBook. And this is a Google Edge CPU, which is what we want to base on this project. And this is the report efficiency. So notice that these are in teraflops. So it's a float-point operations, and these are just integer operations for this device here. And this is the total power consumed by the device plus the server. And this is the accelerator, so this GPU-only power or TPU-only power. So we're talking about like, research class grade GPU, order 400 watts, and this is order 2 watts to use. Of course, now you went from this many float operations to this many integer operations. So the compromise is, well, if you use this, you have only integer operations. That's not good. And you can only do 2D convolutions with current hardware, but you have $50 per unit and 2 watts per unit. So that's maybe advantageous. And how we did this is we had to rethink how we do reconstructions within IceCube. Let's look at this again. So this is our IceCube event. The event comes in. and it's measuring of lights, and you see these hits in our detector. So we thought, well, this looks like a movie. Why don't we convert this into essentially a movie-like problem? So that's what we did. So what we have to do is we have to frame our data. So how will this, I want to explain this like pictorically. So imagine that you're seeing a movie, stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, stage 4, so on and so forth. This is my data points, my frames in my movie. In this case, it's going to be images of my event. And so what you want to do is you want to have some kind of summary or latent space encoding for each of these moments. So that will be in human language. Maybe this happens, this happens, this happens, and then this happens. Okay? That will be my encoded information. And in the end, you ask the computer, what is the movie about? And it tells you it's about this. So that's what we want to do for our events. We want to slice them into shots and then pass that to an AI that we can ask this question about. And so that's what we have done here. This is our network. So essentially, the IceCube event is a slice into time slices. We set a handful of nanoseconds per time slice. And then each time slice is then encoded via CNN encoder. It uses a bunch of 2D convolutions to essentially an embedded space. And then that goes to an LSTM cell. And in the end, you get out a prediction of the direction of the okay? So that's how we bypass the constraints of for the convolutions and whatnot that you will normally need to do in this sort of problem. So this is the most interesting plot in these slides. So this shows you the inference per watt. So higher in these darker columns is better. And this shows you the total power usage for different technologies. And so, for example, if you have a 100, you're talking about, I cannot read the number, but 1,000 watts usage, and about inference is of the level of 10 to the minus 2 inference per watt. And if you're talking about the Google TPU chip, you're talking about 10 to the 7 inferences per watt use, right? So in terms of like power per inference, this is actually much more efficient. The question is, of course, you have done compromises here. Can you get something that's reasonable? And the answer is reasonably yes. So this is for our ice light detector. These are what we can do in our TPU. And this is the SSCNN network I was showing you earlier, which is pretty comparable, actually. Okay, so I just want to say that this is just an example of one neutrino telescope, but there are actually many under plan and under constructions. In particular, IceCube is going to be upgraded with a new sub-detector, which we'll install in a couple of years, which will have more data. And this is how it will look. So this is our current detector. So we're going to install more strings. So that means that your resolution spatially will be much better, especially at lower energies. And then in the next 10 years, we hope to enlarge our array currently in this footprint to a 10 times larger footprint in a project called IceCube Gen 2. And with that, I just want to finish telling you that we have found the first astrophysical sources, and we have recently observed the galaxy neutrinos, thanks for the improvements through machine learning. The images of the sky neutrinos are very blurry and incomplete picture, but detection of high significant sources in the galaxy is only possible through machine learning algorithms, and I think there's going to be great opportunities for the future in this field. So thank you so much for your attention.
Time for a couple of questions for Carlos, and then.
Yeah.
One question. For the low power reconstruction, when you replace the multi-dimensional convolutions with the 10 two-dimensional ones and the LSTM cell, how did your team kind of come up with that architecture? Was it just trial and error, just like throwing stuff together?
It was, I mean, I think we first realized that we could convert it into sort of like, we were thinking about it like a time series sort of analysis, okay, because we saw the data coming in time as a sequence. So this was the first thing that we had to change, because normally we'll do like essentially 3D convolutions, and essentially 4D convolutions because it's time and 3 dimensions on space. So we first said, okay, let's just do it sequentially in time. So this was the first thing. And then there was the problem of, okay, so now we have figured this out. How do we do this? This was actually more like trial and error. That's right. Yes. Thanks.
Yep. Any other questions for Carlos?
I guess, could you also just go over again, like, how we got the hexagonal convolutions?
Yeah, that's maybe, I mean, I think that the idea was that the detector original shape has a hexagonal symmetry. So we wanted to preserve that when doing the convolutions in this sort of orthogonalized grid. And so the idea was, I am going to orthogonalize my grid and then do still convolutions with little hexagonal patches here as a compromise from like having distorted it. I want to say that we now are changing this completely. I don't have slides on this, but essentially what my group is doing right now is changing this to a graph neural network. And in a, in a GNN, you can actually just have arbitrary locations for your nodes, and you're not restricted to a given geometry. So we are replacing this for a better technology. But this is what we did originally. Thank you for your